When an American couple heads to Australia for the ultimate honeymoon at the Great Barrier Reef, joy would turn into horror when the newlywed bride would be found at the bottom of the ocean. Okay, let's go. Christina May Thomas, who went by Tina, was born on the 13th of February 1977 in Ramstein, Germany. Without knowing all the details, as I heard some say adoption, others saying relocated, I do know that she would end up residing in Alabama, and in her mid-20s, she would be described as being pretty and petite.
Pretty and petite. She's little and pretty.
She was pretty and she was little.
Okay.
Tina's father, Tommy, would say that Tina always wanted to get married and she feared that she'd become an old maid. Now, she thought all of this while she was in her early 20s, and we do know marriage was pushed a lot more back then than what it is today, I would think. Even the saying of always a bridesmaid, never a bride came up a lot in this story. Tina met David Gabriel Watson, who went by Gabe, when they were students at the University of Alabama. They would start dating in January 2001. For this case, I read a book by Paul Taylor, and he goes on a bit about this case because it was kind of a mashup of 10 different cases in one. And I also watched some documentaries from back in the day, and it kind of seemed like Gabe and Tina didn't really have the best relationship. Gabe was described as a controlling and burly man, and some would say they even witnessed acts of domestic violence towards Tina. One account, witnesses claimed that whilst Gabe and Tina were at a pizza shop, he threw some pizza at her. Another one that was mentioned was Gabe buying Tina an engagement ring and told her that she couldn't have it until he was ready to propose. Red flag.
On the play.
He also said if she looks for it, he's going to take it back.
What? She's a pretty young lady, and she's with this nightmare gaslighter of a piece of shit man.
Buffoon, yes. Tina's father heard about this and he told her to tell him to take it back, and why should you care? Don't let him do that.
Yes, Dad.
Her father even mentioned to Tina on her wedding day how much he loved her and wanted her to be happy, and that if she had any doubts about this wedding, she didn't have to do it. Tina replied with, "Dad, this is going to be a good day. This is what I want." Her father mentioned years later that throughout the service he couldn't help but cry. Even though his daughter said she wanted to marry Gabe, Tommy just had a bad feeling, and he had this feeling that Gabe wouldn't be able to protect his daughter or treat her the way she should be treated.
Oh yeah, because he was right about that.
Daddy knew. Gabe and Tina would marry on the 11th of October 2003 at Birmingham, which is in Alabama.
Birmingham, Alabama.
Alabama. After the reception, Tommy would almost get stuck in the elevator trying to give his daughter one last hug and to tell her that he loves her. He would end up touching Gabe's arm and telling him to take care of his little girl. This would be the last time Tommy would see his daughter alive. Now, Gabe was so controlling, in fact, that he'd already planned out their honeymoon. He planned on travelling to Australia. The newlywed couple would spend some days sightseeing before heading off to Townsville and arriving there on the 21st of October 2003. Now, if you're from Australia, you might be thinking, why would you be going to Townsville?
Yeah.
Well, Gabe enjoyed scuba diving. So Gabe was classified as an experienced diver. He had gained an open water certificate in May 1998.
Oh, he got a certificate.
An advanced open water certificate in August 1998.
Look, I can swim.
I can do swimming. A rescue dive certificate in April 1999. And he had completed 55 dives, including 6 of those at night time. And over the last year, he'd completed 12 dives, with the deepest being 150 feet. Now, you might be thinking,
Well, excuse me, Ashley, but what the heck does this guy going for dives have anything to do with true crime?
well, my little mung beans, this was his plan for Townsville. He wanted to visit the Yongala shipwreck, which is just near Townsville. The SS Yongala, if you weren't aware of it, was a passenger steamship that was built in 1903 in England for the Adelaide Steamship Company. Unfortunately, it would sink off the coast of Queensland in 1911 due to a cyclone. All of the 122 passengers and crew aboard lost their lives. When the ship did not reach Townsville, people assumed that maybe, like a few others, it had taken shelter during the cyclone.
Cyclones and just weird weather events are abound up that way.
By March 26th, it was listed as missing. Searches were made and wreckage would start to show up. And I'm sorry, but you know me and horses and the death of animals. But the body of a racehorse called Moonshine was found at Gordon Creek. And I think the horse was travelling to Townsville from Melbourne or something like that for a race. I could be mistaken, but my heart. So this ship, I swear I'm getting somewhere in this rant. The wreckage of the ship was officially found in 1958 when a local fisherman found the wreckage, recovered a safe that unfortunately was filled with sludge, but the serial number was traced back to being the one on the ship. They were kind of hoping to find, some documents or some info, not like a treasure or something.
Oh, I was going to say, I'd be looking for money.
Yeah. Money.
Money.
So this wreckage is located in the central section of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. The wreckage is 109 metres or 380 feet long, and the depth of the water to the seafloor is about 30 metres or 98 feet, with the upper parts of the wreck 16 metres or 52 feet below the surface. It is a major tourist attraction even to this day, as she is one of the largest, most intact historic shipwrecks.
Shit.
Of course, for an experienced diver, another item to tag off the bucket list. I found plenty of reports about Tina starting to panic a bit about going on the dive. You see, she was classed as an inexperienced diver. She had only completed 5 dives, and it was actually Gabe who got her into doing scuba lessons. Her friends and family thought it was odd that she would want to do this because she hated having her hair wet, but as a child as well, she had a heart problem. I couldn't find out the exact heart issue, but I did see a lot around heart rate being higher than a normal person, but I cannot say for sure. Her friends even made a comment that they wouldn't expect her to go there for her honeymoon. They didn't expect her to go to Australia. Not like there's anything wrong, but I think the trip being just for scuba diving, they were just like, that's a bit weird. A lot of talk of the controlling side and doing things Gabe wanted to do. On the 21st of October at 10 p.m, Gabe and Tina would board the Spoil Sport along with a few other guests, and they departed the port of Townsville to head to the Yongala dive site. They left there at about 11:30 and would end up reaching the site by 2 a.m. the following morning. Wade Singleton, who was the trip director, would later state in an interview that they had everyone come in early so that they could all have a chat, see what diving experience they have, and so on, and also to just kind of have a one-on-one interview with him. So he seemed to be across all of the safety kind of things. It was established that Gabe was a rescue diver and competent and capable. Tina was very new, so the director suggested that she should actually undertake a daytime orientation dive with a professionally trained diver, but unfortunately she declined and said that she felt comfortable to dive with her husband. The director actually mentioned that to Gabe and her twice. So more than once, he said, I really think that you should be going with an experienced diver.
And Gabe was obviously like, nah, she's right.
Yeah. The weather conditions that morning were said to be really good. The only thing in question for the staff that day was around the current, as it was pretty strong. Before the dive took place, another briefing went down. They talked about safety, everything you should expect going down on this trip. Gabe and Tina headed out for their dive first, as they each kind of went in their own little groups. I think you kind of had like a diving buddy. It might have been some people if they're experienced 2, 1, that kind of thing. A short time later, the couple would resurface as Gabe was complaining that his dive computer was having some issues. I was like,
what is a dive computer?
Exactly. And I'm sorry to any of the avid divers out there who may be listening. It does look like a great time, but it's a device that measures the time and depth and calculates a profile and all of the things to help people on their trip if that makes sense. Stuff you need to know, I would assume.
I don't, because I'm never going. Like, I'm never
never
going.
would, yeah.
Never.
Snorkel, yeah, maybe, but not diving. No, thank you.
Even like, we live in Australia. I don't know if people out there know, but there are a lot of bull sharks and there are a lot of tiger sharks, and obviously we do get great whites, but it's just and sea snakes.
Not even that. Stonefish.
Yeah, but only if you stand on them.
But that's what I mean. You could just be walking along the
But
beach
it's
and...
you who does it. They're not coming for you.
Yeah, no.
Those other things, they're coming for you.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Things will come for you. Things won't come for you and you'll just stand on them. Australia. Once that was fixed, the couple then headed out for their second dive, and by this time, the director had mentioned that the current had actually started to settle down a fair amount. It wasn't as bad as what it was. The director and his team, or the group he was with, would dive in a couple of seconds after Gabe and Tina. I think it was mentioned around 20 to 30 seconds after. Wade mentioned that he was in the water for about 7 minutes when he noticed something extremely odd. A diver was away from the wreck and actually laying on the floor of the seabed. Wade straight away went into action mode. He was thinking, what has happened here? Where is this person's body? And when he kept looking, he noticed that there was no bubbles coming from them at all.
Uh-oh.
He raced over to the person and immediately noticed it was Tina. He grabbed her and headed straight for the surface. Whilst this was happening, a couple on the boat was getting ready to go for their second dive when they noticed a flustered Gabe surfaced with no Tina. They immediately asked him what was going on and where was Tina, and Gabe responded with, she didn't come up. When questioned further, Gabe said she was overweighted. So this small woman was overweighted and panicking and flailing so much that she knocked his mask and his breathing thingy or regulator out of his mouth. He continued that by the time he fixed himself up, she was sinking, feet first, hands outreached towards Gabe, and the diver said, Gabe, you left her? And Gabe replied, I had to get assistance. I felt a certain way about this case, so allegedly, and also just reading from court documents, but woosah. Going into this case, I was like, okay, it's fine. And then the further I got in, I was like, everything is not fine. This is not fine. It is going to get worse.
Can you remind me again the very specific accreditation that he had for when someone is struggling?
Yeah.
Or needs help?
Yeah. So, he was an experienced diver. He had completed a rescue dive.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That one right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. From now on, if this hasn't frustrated you, it's going to frustrate you even more. So, heads up.
I was already annoyed when I heard his name. I was already annoyed when I heard that he was a gaslighting sack of shit. If it gets worse from here, you're going home and I'm going to bed.
Right. Well, on that
See
note,
you later. Goodbye.
Goodbye. So this diver that had been talking to Gabe just kind of stared at him for a long time, kind of confused, and he said straight out, Gabe, that didn't happen. Apparently, number one diving rule is you never ever leave someone in that situation. And it was mentioned that his story made no sense whatsoever.
No,
you're fine. For an experienced diver, let alone someone who has done rescues and dived deeper than what he was currently doing.
The deepest he dived was like 150 feet, wasn't it?
Which is more than this.
Which is more than 30 feet. Mm-hmm. He's also a rescue diver. He's also done 12 successful, whatever the heck the other thing dives were.
Nighttime dives, 55.
Nighttime dives, daytime dives, more dangerous areas than this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yet somehow this petite woman is overweighted.
Yeah, it only gets much worse. Wade resurfaced with Tina and they were able to jump on a close by vessel. This is where first aid / CPR would start. Luckily enough, out of the 4 or 5 people around at the time, some of them were emergency doctors and nurses. So very lucky to have that.
Yeah, but he's also an accredited rescue diver. We saw how that went.
They worked on her for about 40 to 45 minutes before they stopped. Tina Watson had passed away. Now, I'd just like to mention one little thing, and I tried, as I said before, not to go into this case biased, but it didn't take a long time before I felt a certain way. The whole time, strangers were working on Gabe's new wife. He didn't even bother to swim over to be with her. He found out she had passed away when someone came over to their boat and Gabe asked, "Is she okay?" The passenger replied with, "No, she didn't make it." He was not even on the boat with her. The photos, the boats were like this far away. He literally could have jumped into the water, swam not that far to go see his wife. Weird thing number one of many.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Once both vessels arrived back, police took statements from passengers on each boat and also a typed statement from Gabe. He told officers he and Tina entered the water. His computer malfunctioned, so they went back up. The second time they entered the water, once they reached about 15 meters, Tina indicated to Gabe that she wanted to resurface. He stated they started to head back, to which at some point Tina started panicking and knocked off his mask and regulator. It was once he let her go to readjust his equipment that he realized she was about 5 or 10 feet below him, so only 1.5 meters. He went to swim after her, realized there was nothing he could do, so he went up for help. Whilst heading up, he bumped into 2 divers. However, due to language barriers, as he said, in a not so nice way like that, he was unable to communicate with them, so he continued to the surface to grab help. 1.5 meters below you. You have flippers on, and you could not get to her.
There's about 2 meters between where we are right now.
Can't get ya. Sorry, Dub.
See ya.
Bit nasty on ya.
There's
You're too
nothing
far.
I could do.
Police weren't too suspicious of Gabe, as most stated they didn't know much about diving, the officers. And although it was weird to just leave your wife of 11 days to sink to the bottom of the ocean, one officer stated that people do strange things when in shock or surrounded by grief. While all of this was going down on October 22nd in Alabama, Tommy received a call around 8:36 a.m. and it was Gabe's father. He called and said, "I don't really know how to say this, but there's been an accident. Tina drowned. Here is my preacher." Apparently poor Tommy fell to his knees and Gabe would get on the phone and told the story that he had told police. Tommy and his wife would ask, "Well, did you go over to be with her when you were calling her name to try and get her to come back?" Gabe said, "Yes, I went over. I tried to get her to come back." Although everyone was still stuck on the how could he leave her, they all just assumed it was an unfortunate accident.
Nah.
Because, we do know diving comes with dangers, but things are not
When you're going with
adding
an
up.
experienced, accredited diver, anything that happens to you is not a freak accident at that point. Especially if you're only 1.5 meters away from the person. What happened was intentional.
Several days later, Gabe, who was still in Australia, asked to see officers so that he could clarify a few things.
Sure.
Yeah, just a couple of things I forgot to mention. Originally, he said the currents were around a 5 from a 0 out of 10, but now he wanted to say they were pretty extreme. They were the strongest he had ever seen, and he thinks that is what set Tina off.
Even though the instructor literally said that the currents have calmed down? Obviously, there's going to be an inconsistency there because they will talk to the diver person about that and they'll be like, "Well, no, they'd calm down. I'm not jumping the gun. You are."
During this interview, who do you think this man had in there with him?
What man?
Old Gaby boy.
Oh, Gaby baby.
Yeah, his mother. I also found out that his mother had booked tickets and was on her way to her son in Australia before Tina's parents even knew she had passed. In this interview, the officer asked, "At any time were you and Tina offered an orientation dive?" To which he answered,
No.
Gabe even mentioned no one had told him how to get someone out of that kind of situation.
Stop. He is a rescue diver.
So when officers heard this, they were kind of starting to think, is he trying to shift the blame? It's kind of gone from unfortunate accident, grieving husband to,
Not me.
yeah, what are you doing? Now, at the time, due to no suspicion of foul play, Gabe left the country and went home to bury his wife in November 2003. Tina's best friend would later say that she tried to stay friends with Gabe until she received a not so nice Christmas card. And I'm pretty sure this was literally the Christmas that year that she had died.
What do you mean a not so nice Christmas? Who does anti-Christmas cards? Well, Gabe.
Yeah. You see, it was a card that had a picture of Gabe and Tina in their wedding clothes on the front, and inside there was a few lines, and one of the lines was, "Who is that sexy guy in the picture with Tina? Oh yeah, that's me, smiley face. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Gabe."
What? Okay. Did anyone else get anything like that or just her?
I think it was nearly everyone, like family.
Everyone got, oh, who's that sexy guy in the picture with my dead wife?
Well, I don't know if they got that same message, but they got the Christmas card of him and her, and then just signing it as him, even though his wife is dead.
Is he psychotic?
It's gonna get a lot worse. Now, Ken Snyder, and I watched the documentary I watched did an interview with him, and I really liked this guy. He was the diver that originally spoke to Gabe when he first resurfaced, and he said something just didn't feel right about the whole situation, and he really wanted to reach out to Tina's parents.
Good. Someone's doing something.
Definitely. They had some conversations about what happened that day and what he saw, and it just ripped apart the story that Gabe had been feeding everyone.
Good.
This diver brought up the fact that he didn't believe that Tina was serenely sinking, arms reaching out for Gabe, feet going first. Ken went on to say that if someone was in water having a panic attack, they would be flailing about and climbing over whoever they could to get to the surface.
Yep.
He pretty much blatantly said, "Only dead people sink."
Yes,
This completely changed Tommy's perspective of the events and really made him question what happened that day and what was Gabe's part in it. 2 days after the conversation with Ken, Tommy received a letter from Gabe's attorney requesting access to all of Tina's things, because even though they were married for 11 days, they were still married. So the poor father is grieving because I think he had a lot of Tina's stuff. So he's just going, oh my gosh, I've lost my daughter. And now he's got a letter to say, you've got this amount of days, pack up the stuff, give it to Gabe. Tommy, like the absolute badass father, like he was, headed over to Australia. He wanted to talk to the officers and he wanted to talk to Wade, the man that brought his daughter back up to the surface. So he flew from Alabama to Australia to find out what the heck happened.
Well, you'd probably want to do that, hey, especially if the only person you're really having contact with about it is a lying sack of shit.
I think if Ken hadn't contacted him, it mightn't have kicked off. Like
that contact may have lit a fire under him.
I think it did, because he was already sus on it all, but he didn't really have anything to go off. Wade had said in an interview that he was a little worried to meet Tina's father, but he felt at ease rather quickly when all he really wanted was the facts of that day, and if Gabe went over to Tina while they were working on her. This is where Wade broke the news that Tommy's son-in-law stayed on the other boat whilst they tried to resuscitate his daughter. Red flag.
On the play.
The autopsy revealed that Tina had died of drowning, however, they were unable to say how. Her equipment seemed to be working fine, no medical conditions. Like I said earlier, even though she had the heart problem, they kind of thought it hadn't fixed itself, but it wasn't an issue at all. No medical conditions that may have caused it, so now investigators really wanted to find out how she drowned.
I have a theory. I reckon when they were down there, he pulled her mask off her.
Ooh.
And then she was flailing around, which would have knocked his mask off. I think that he put her mask back on her and then went up to the surface.
Very close. For the theory, anyway.
Do we know what actually happened?
I don't know.
We do. Okay, good. I'm waiting. Well, I don't want to hear it because that guy's pissing me off, but...
You're gonna hate me later.
Why?
Might be leading you up just to bring you back down, Dal. Who knows?
Great.
Yeah.
Love that. I love that for me.
Officers started to look more into Gabe and his stories. They literally started analysing his interrogation videos. So they're looking at his stories, watching how he spoke, what he said, and they found out due to some reenactment testing that they had done around his watch, so many things just weren't matching. I didn't write this down, but Gabe had mentioned that he'd put the battery in the wrong way, so it beeped and did this, but it should have been doing this. So the police tested all these theories and it was like, it doesn't beep when this is around, it doesn't do this. So already, besides everything else, it's just not matching up. They even did a reenactment of Tina drowning to see how quickly a body would go down before Gabe could reach her. Expert divers would reveal to investigators that with the equipment Gabe had on, within a few kicks, he could have reached her. Police also looked into his qualifications, which I don't know why that wasn't done at the start, but they realised, oh, hang on a second, this guy had actually been trained in bringing unconscious divers to the surface. So, although the police did good jobs like with reenacting and stuff, how did you not know what his qualifications were? That should have been the initial... Like, I know they took a statement thinking it was something bad. Dot your I's, cross your T's.
That would be one of the first things I would check. I mean, I would also get witness testimony.
Another bit of evidence that would come in was one of the divers at the time taking a picture. And in that picture on the floor of the ocean, you can see Tina, and you can also see Wade swimming towards her. So this photo that came up also proved another hole in Gabe's story. Instead of being found just on the wreck or near it, she was found 16 meters away from the wreck. Police also decided to look into the two divers, you know, the ones Gabe ran into, that due to a language barrier he was unable to get help.
Let me guess, they speak English.
Police spoke to everyone on those boats, and not one person was met by Gabe asking for help at any point.
So it's worse than them not speaking English. They didn't exist.
I know I keep poking holes, but in Gabe's statement, he also said to police he rocketed to the surface and he was so proud of himself. He had never gone that fast before. Yeah, his computer said otherwise. It showed that it took Gabe about 2 or 3 minutes to reach 15 meters.
But, I mean, to be fair, in Gabe's defense, wasn't he having some issues with the computer on his little whatever, the Hoojamajar?
Nobody did, but then he got that fixed and then he went for a dive again. So it was all fine by then. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, you know, what Gabe says. Expert divers would liken that to the pace of a pedestrian. Just to add salt to injury, they compared it to Wade's time and found that Wade swam double the length and carried Tina in half the time it took Gabe to take himself to the top. But also, if you've got a qualification in bringing unconscious people to the surface, I don't think that speed would get you qualified.
Is there a speed requirement?
I don't know.
See, then we can't speak in absolutes, can we?
Here I am just assuming things.
Yeah, you're being an asshat for this really lovely guy who swam really quickly.
By 2005, Australian authorities reached out to the Helena Police Department, which was in Alabama, and one of the officers first assigned to this case was actually a bit dismissive and thought it was just going to be nothing. So they made and did some kind of mutual thing that I didn't really look at the wording for it, and Australian police were able to find out more of Gabe's odd behaviour on returning home. Some of those things included stealing the flowers from his wife's grave and binning them.
What?
Gabe then put notice in to have his wife's body exhumed and moved because he wanted to put it in a plot he owns, because by now the two families were not seeing eye to eye. So the plot that she was buried in was owned by her father. I would assume he paid for it. Gabe wanted to dig her up, move her into a different plot. The plot was 100 yards away, and in 2005, the officer recorded. Tina's dad was there and watching it all unfold. He was just a mess. Like, can you imagine watching your daughter get dug up, exhumed?
Yeah.
Gabe wasn't even there. He was nowhere to be seen, but he did send his father and his father's mate to watch it. So you can see the video footage online of this coffin getting exhumed, chucked on the back of this dirty looking truck just to be taken a couple of grave sites down. Tina's dad is pretty much on the ground just like crying, just being like, what is happening? And Gabe's dad and his mate are just standing there watching it, making sure it happens. The flowers continued to disappear as Tommy would visit and place new ones every week, and it got to the point that he actually chained the flowers to the tombstone with a bike lock. Police set up surveillance and finally they caught Gabe walking to Tina's grave with some bolt cutters. He grabs the flowers, chucks them on the street, and then drives away.
What is this guy's problem? Also, didn't we get rid of coverture a long time ago? How does this moron feel like he has ownership of this poor dead woman's body?
America, we love you, but you need to sort yourself out. That shouldn't be allowed. I'm sorry, but no.
It shouldn't be allowed anywhere.
No. Now, one final thing I find interesting and wanted to go through is a witness came forward about something he saw. Dr. Stanley, who tried to revive Tina, had told officers that he'd seen an interaction in the water, and it was that of Tina and Gabe. The doctor said she looked in distress, flailing her arms about, and then Gabe came in and kind of on top of her, he embraced Tina, with his arms going around to the middle of her back for about 30 seconds. They separated, and then this is when Gabe went to the top and Tina sunk.
Why is this only coming out now?
But exactly, why
The
is this
woman's
only
been
coming
buried twice now. This clown then comes out and says, oh yeah, well...
out? If he revived Tina and they took statements, I'm like, did they really take statements? Why didn't the other guy,
But
I
why
don't know.
why didn't he go to the authorities and say, I actually saw him bear hug the woman before she died?
The theory officers had was that Gabe faked his computer not working in order to get Tina out of the water and then going back to the dive spot. So they must have, I think they had a certain area they resurface, and then once they resurface, there's a different spot they dive to. So this would mean people were already heading through the wreckage and he wouldn't have as many people around them or witnesses for Gabe to be caught doing anything. They think that he took Tina away from what he assumed being a visible range. They believe that in this embrace, with her being face first, he has turned her air off, she has fought back, and then knocked his mask off. She would have gone unconscious, and realizing he would need to turn it back on so as not to raise suspicion, he went back and turned it on, which is what the doctor saw. So I think the doctor saw him go in and embrace her, let her go, then kind of went back down for a second and then went back up before she...
So the second dip down, when she was too far away to get, he turned it back on and then swam up.
Yeah, that's what they assume. Police had trouble finding a motive, though, as this is all rather circumstantial. They find out that Gabe was controlling, that he got up Tina for catching up with another male, and then finally Tina came home one day to tell her dad that Gabe wanted to up the life insurance and change the beneficiary from Tina's dad to Gabe. Thankfully, with everything going on, she didn't have time to do this, so her father said, just say you did and we'll take care of it when you get back. I feel like I should just make a list of what didn't Gabe do, because upon returning home from Australia, he rocked up to Tina's workplace asking about insurance and was annoyed when they said he wasn't entitled to it. The life insurance payout was meant to be around $160,000 at the time. There was an inquest on the 19th of November 2007, so this is all happening like a fair few years after her death. And Gabe didn't come in, so he didn't come to Australia because it was all circumstantial. Gabe's lawyers tried saying the cops were going out of their way to get their client. So I don't think they were very worried to come over because they were like, don't really have evidence of anything. The inquest came back and it was concluded that there was enough evidence for this to go to trial for intent to murder, and Gabe was indicted for murder. Around this time, Gabe also gets himself a new wife.
Interesting.
So I know 2003, 2007, when you got a new wife. On the 13th of May 2009, two officers were waiting at the Brisbane International Airport where Gabe came in from Los Angeles and he was arrested for murder. You might think, why did he come back so easily? Like, why didn't he fight it? Because he had a little trick up his sleeve. And that trick was a plea for manslaughter that was accepted. And the basis of the plea was negligence under S290 of the Criminal Code, which provides, when a person undertakes to do any act, the omission to do which is or may be dangerous to human life or health, it is the person's duty to do that act, and the person is held to have caused any consequences which result to the life or health of any person by reason of any omission to perform that duty. And then it had section 290, well, it had on the court documents, it had number 5. Section 290 arose because the respondent, an experienced diver, had undertaken to act as the buddy of his wife, who was inexperienced. He failed to perform his duty towards her and thereby contributed to her death. The applicable maximum penalty was life imprisonment. With consideration from the judge and given the unique circumstances, he was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. After serving just 18 months, Gabe was released and sent back to America. On the 24th of February 2012, he would stand trial in Birmingham, Alabama, where Judge Tommy Nail ruled that the evidence against him on a charge of murder was not strong enough to put before a jury. I'm sorry but not sorry, this judge sounded like an absolute twat, and even made the comment of, you can indict a ham sandwich if you want to. He was acquitted and to this day is a free man with a wife and and I'd just like to end with an interview done in 2012 with 60 Minutes, and Liz Hayes asked, do you regret that forever you may be known as the Honeymoon Killer? Gabe replied, I mean, how can you be deemed a killer when the courts have ruled that you didn't kill? I could be the honeymoon negligent diver, but not the honeymoon killer. And that, dear mung beans, is the alleged questionable man that is Gabe Watson. The man who allegedly killed his wife, but he didn't, but he so did, allegedly.
He didn't, but he did. Allegedly didn't, but he did, allegedly.
But I'm also just stating like reports and stuff that were out there and the documents that I saw, and yeah, told you it'd get worse.
I literally have nothing to add.
Make sure you like and subscribe and follow our channels and tell your friends, share them around so we get more listens. And do you like our new equipment? And on that note, goodbye. He said goodbye.
Dun dun dun.
It doesn't feel right.
Just not used to it.
I'm not used to it.
You also just really like that big black thing in your mouth.
Oh my god, you got
I just thought my son little
Yo,
Du hast mich.
from Deutschland. Thomas
Jr.
Thomas. Gabe.
Oh, Gabby. See, I can swear now because we cut it out anyway.
Yeah, and we can hear it really well.
Yeah.
It's crisp.
Crisp.
You're picking up the crisp C's
Yeah, look at that.
and T's of...
So this ship, I swear I'm getting... It sounds like I said shit, hey?
Yeah.
The way I talk, I'm like shit.
So this shit is just English.
I know, but I can't. I'm a breathy girl. Be prepared. There's a few things.
Be prepared.